You will recall that I indicated that one of the major problems we have is that we as African people have permitted the European to be the definer of reality, to be the categorizer of the world, to be the person that names things in the universe. This power, having been ceded to the European, has, of course, reflected back on us in the form of self-hatred. Because this power to name, to define, has been used then to negatively name and define black people. We were looking then at the connotations that were attached to the African body itself. I will today quote extensively from Frantz Fanon's book, Black Skin, White Masks. A book essentially written in terms of the Antillean black, the Martinican blacks, but which has equal applicability to blacks the world over. In this book, then, he makes some very poignant points in reference to the black body itself. Let's look then at a quote here that he makes on page 160. He is making reference to Jean-Paul Sartre's book on anti-Semitism and working some parallels with the things that Sartre talked about in that book. Jean-Paul Sartre says, Fanon has made a masterful study of the problem of anti-Semitism. Let us try to determine what are the constituents of Negrophobia. And of course, phobia is a term we use quite frequently in psychology, and I'm sure it's a term you're very familiar with, which of course comes from the Greek word for fear. Let's look then, he states, at the constituents of the fear of the black man. We must recognize that the action of the European toward the black man is not merely one that seeks to express his superiority or his vaunted superiority, but also expresses his fear of the black man. And to a great extent, it is the European's defense of his fear, defense of himself, that is the basis and foundation of his racism, and is the basis and foundation of his attempt to destroy the black man, and to recruit the black man in his own destruction through the mechanism of self-hate. When you get people to hate themselves, then they will do a job on themselves. They will self-destruct. And of course, if you want the system to work very, very well, you inculcate them with certain emotions so that they become self-destructive. And in that regard, then you can escape the blame for their destruction, and they can perceive themselves as being the only one who is to blame for their destruction. In Europe, the black man is the symbol of evil. One must move softly, I know, but it is not easy. The torturer is the black man. Satan is black. One talks of shadows. When one is dirty, one is black. Whether one is thinking of physical dirtiness or moral dirtiness. It would be astonishing if the trouble were taken to bring them all together, to see the vast number of expressions that make the black man the equivalent of sin. In Europe, whether concretely or symbolically, the black man stands for the bad side of the character. As long as one cannot understand this fact, one is doomed to talk in circles about the black problem. Blackness, darkness, shadow, shades, night, the labyrinths of the earth, abysmal depths, blacken someone's reputation, and on the other side, the bright look of innocence, the white dove of peace, magical, heavenly light. A magnificent blonde child. How much peace there is in that phrase. How much joy. How above all, and above all, how much hope. There is no comparison with a magnificent black child. Literally, such a thing is unwanted. Just the same, I shall go back into the stories of black angels. In Europe, that is to say, In every civilized and civilizing country, the Negro is the symbol of sin, the archetype of the lowest values represented by the Negro. Here again, then, is the imago that Fanon, of course, referred to of late, as I spoke earlier, that then looks at the black man as symbolizing the evil dark side of the personality. The problem with this, of course, is that if it were just left in the European mind, it would not be a problem. But given his economic, political, social, and cultural power, this image works itself out upon the world and into the environment. And ultimately, it works itself into the psyche of the black man, period. The color black symbolizes evil, sin, wretchedness, death, war, famine. All birds of prey are black. In Martinique, whose collective unconscious makes it a European country, when a blue Negro, a cold black one, comes to visit, one reacts at once. What bad luck is he bringing? And of course, but it's interesting when you look at the fact that Fanon essentially is writing about the Martinican and the Antillean black person. And of course, what he is indicating here to a good extent is that these black people have a collective unconsciousness that pretty much make them perceive themselves as European whites. And he talks about, of course, the psychology of these black Martinicans who still have problems in identifying themselves with their Africanism. One thing I found very remarkable, I think the French, as Europeans, probably do the best job of brainwashing of any group. Next, I think the English are probably second. The American whites are very crude. And in a way, we kind of have to thank them for their crudeness because it meant that, I think to a good degree, Afro-Americans' consciousness didn't quite die such a hard death as some of our people colonized by the French. And you go over into some of our countries today that were originally colonized by the French, and you will see quite often there that the mind is still colonized today. The French, of course, Fanon refers to his chapter on language. And one of the things that the French, I think, convinced this colonized people of was that one could be a Frenchman to the degree that one could speak French very well. And so if you are African and you learn to speak French as the French do, and better than the French do, it made you a Frenchman, a real hoax, a real game. And of course we see that same kind of tendency in this country as well, where we believe learning the language of the master somehow makes us masterful and somehow identifies us with the master. But the French were I think, best at this game, where the identifying with French mannerisms and identifying with the French language was tantamount to becoming a Frenchman oneself.